Hi everyone, it's the Wandering Hermit back again for the 2018 YouTube Pagan Challenge. Today I'm talking about the letter I, and my subject for this particular entry is initiation. So I want to talk a little bit about what initiation is, first of all. So we think of the word initiation, we mean to initiate or to begin something, to start something. So initiation in its purest sense is a new beginning or a rebirth. So when we hear the word initiation, we automatically think of secret societies, the Freemasons, and the ancient mystery schools and organisations of that ilk. But initiation really can refer to or be related to absolutely any walk of life. But I'll start by talking about the mystery schools and that sort of thing. Now, the ancient mystery traditions, particularly of Europe, are pretty elaborate, as we can see from history. The Eleusinian mysteries, as an example, have three primary degrees of initiation. So you have your introduction to the mysteries, which are typically just a confirmation that you have been recognized as a member of that society, and that you're privy to certain bits of information. Then you'll have a second degree where you're introduced to the sort of the fundamental principles of that particular school of thought. And then you'll have your third degree of initiation, which would relate to the true essence of what that organisation is about. It'll just be a hint of that. So using Freemasonry as a modern day example, because it's fashioned so similarly on the Eleusinian mysteries, your first degree would be almost like a rebirth from your unrefined human self, your everyday self, into a roughly formed but recognizable piece of usable material, which is then to be shaped and polished as you go through the degrees. His second degree will be your introduction to the noble arts and sciences, upon which the structure of the organisation as a whole is based. So it says, well, basically, now you've been introduced, your passing is the introduction to the arts and sciences, which you will study in your spare time. And then your third degree is the introduction to your fundamental principle behind Freemasonry, which, if you look to any mystery tradition in history, you can link them back to Freemasonry, because Freemasonry incorporates so many little bits from so many different schools of thought. It'll be basically transcending death, transcending mortality, and recognizing that you have a mortal soul. Your body is mortal, rather, but your soul is immortal. So that's a basic example. Now, the mystery traditions of other indigenous cultures around the world aren't quite as clear cut, not quite as elaborate, I suppose, but they are equally as deep and meaningful. So you'll have shamanic tradition around the globe, various indigenous shamanic traditions. They all have the idea of being initiated by spirit. So a majority of the time, I mean, there are some cultures where this doesn't apply, but in a large number of them, and a majority of them, the whole idea is that you have to be chosen by spirit, and this usually happens through the prospective shaman being subject to a life-threatening illness or having a near-death experience, in which their human self is kind of broken down, and they become a vessel for spirits to then work in the world. So this is kind of an initiation into the life of a shaman. Some traditions, they say that you have to be accepted by the existing shaman or medicine man or woman of the tribe, and then they have to educate you by teaching you certain things through your life. So even outside of the mystical aspect of things, initiations are prevalent in pretty much all cultures around the world for different things. If you look at the Spartans, their initiation, which in many ways is similar to some initiatory rites in the Native American tribes, is to send your young boy out into the wilderness, and he has to survive on his own with the skills that he's been given in his childhood. And if he comes back, then he's elevated in status in that society. So the Spartans would basically take the child at a young age, train them up in hand-to-hand and armed combat and survival skills, navigation, all those things. Then they'd throw them out into the mountains and say, right, survive on your own through the winter. If you come back at the end of it, then you're strong enough. You can basically be trained up to become part of the army. Now, this initiatory experience doesn't stop there, naturally. That's why it's only a beginning. Initiation shouldn't just be a one-off in your life. We have several initiations through our lifetime. Shakespeare writes about the 7 ages of man, where you go through periods of your life of roughly 7 to 8 years. And at the end of each of those 7 to 8 year periods, we change into a different person. And through self-analysis, we can actually really pinpoint the turning points in our lives around those ages. And they're usually marked by major shifts in life circumstance, or family events, or traumas, or experiences which really make us rethink the way we see the world or the way we see ourselves. So, the way I say it, initiation is not just an introduction to a new way of thinking. It's a rite of passage that everyone has to go through. But it's just one of many rites of passage, and that's effectively what this video pertains to, is rites of passage and their significance in our society. So, what the problem is with our current, Western society at least, is that we have abandoned the idea of the rites of passage, and that has led to a large number of the social problems that we have today. I think if we were to bring in the idea of initiations back into our everyday culture and into family units and family traditions, we may see a decrease in the social problems that we see with the younger generations. As an example, for a lot of children, I think the idea of being allowed to consume alcohol with a meal, allowed by their parents, is in a way an initiation or an initiatory experience. In the sense that that child feels as though they have earned the right to do what the adults are doing. It makes them feel included. It's a mystery that they've not, been able to understand. Why do they drink this, and why do they start acting weird when they drink this? Why is it so enjoyable to them? I want to experience this. I want to understand. And I think that curiosity, if it's not satisfied early on, it kind of builds up in the individual, and it festers and becomes poisonous, to the point where they then go out in their early teens. Their curiosity drives them to experiment with alcohol, and because they don't have the proper guidance and the understanding as to how to enjoy that experience safely, they overdo it, they get into trouble, and it becomes a habit for them. It becomes a rebellion for them because they've been denied that experience for so long. So I think something as simple as letting your kids have a glass of wine with a meal, or a shandy, with a meal, something as simple as that, can prevent many problems further down the line. And I would regard that as a rite of passage or an initiation. Taking that idea and running with it at key points through a child's development, they should be introduced to certain experiences which act as rites of passage. A rite of passage that I went through when I was younger was, now a lot of people would disagree with this naturally because of their own inclinations, but I mean, I'm a different person to who I was then, so I have a somewhat negative view of it now, but it has helped. When I was young, I was taken out on a hunt, and I was taught how to trap, I was taught how to shoot, and I was taught how to prepare and cook the food that I'd killed. And whilst it was in many ways a traumatic experience for me, it was presented to me in a way that made me feel as though I was achieving something. It made me feel included in, you know, what the adults were doing, so it made me feel as though I was somehow equal to them and being accepted. It also taught me to respect the adults because, to my view, they did this all the time and they made it look easy. Whereas it demonstrated to me that there was so much that I didn't know and so much I needed to learn. So it really emphasises that that gulf of experience and knowledge between the adult and the child. It kind of establishes the teacher-student mentality, and it kind of teaches humility, which I think a lot of children and young adults nowadays don't have. And the experiences that we go through in our lives, being so cushioned and sheltered the majority of the time, prevents us from understanding what it means to have humility. So I'm not condoning anyone to take their kids hunting, because I now personally disagree with hunting, unless of course it's under extreme circumstances for food and survival, because we live in a society where we don't need to do that anymore. So I'm not going to go into that, it's a different issue. But I would say that a similar experience, taking your kids out camping, showing them how to, navigate using, the plants, using the sun, using the stars, know what plants are edible and which ones aren't, that sort of thing. Knowing how to make fire in any weather conditions, that sort of thing, is a really, really good way to connect to your kids, and also to make them understand what it is to be a child compared to being an adult. It reinforces respect, it reinforces humility, all the things that I've previously mentioned. And I think if everyone did this, then kids wouldn't feel this need to go out and rebel against their families. They wouldn't feel this need to go out and, prove themselves by acting like idiots and making a nuisance of themselves and getting into trouble, because they're already proving themselves to their families in a way that is, constructive. So I think we need to see a resurgence of the initiation in our society. Now, having been initiated into the Freemasons as an example, it's taught me a lot about myself. Now, it's also taught me a lot about how I see society. There were certain things in society which I saw as wrong, but since my initiation and since my passing and raising, I've looked at those same issues that I had a negative attitude towards previously with a new perspective and a new way of thinking, and it's led me to understand the reasons behind why society is structured the way it is, the reasons behind why people do certain things, and why there is a divide between one group of people and another. Now, whilst I'm all for unity and equality, I also understand why the division is there. And in understanding the reasons behind the division, it's also helped me understand ways that I can work around that divide. So that just demonstrates to me that an initiation is a really useful way of opening up the mind to new ways of thinking, new ways of seeing the world. So if we were to incorporate this back into our culture, Western culture, because it's still prevalent in many Eastern cultures and in many cultures in the Southern Hemisphere, if we were to rediscover this, we may find that our society changes for the better. People are more understanding of one another. People are more accepting of one another. People take a little bit more personal responsibility for their own thoughts, their own words, and their own actions. And the societal ills that we see of youth culture, alcoholism, drug abuse, violence, graffiti, and just general vandalism. The lack of respect for the older generations, I think we'd see a dramatic reduction in those things. So, just my thoughts on initiation. I mean, as a magical practitioner, I think initiations into the craft, whichever craft it is, whether you're a heathen, whether you're a Wicca, whether you're Hellenic pagan, whether you're more orientated towards the Native American practices, any of these systems of magic, it's really good to introduce people into these crafts in a way which makes it seem, well, it's going to seem fun to the person, naturally. It's got to instill a feeling of belonging and community into the individual as well, but also personal empowerment. I think that's the key factor with the initiation. You feel as though you've been gifted or instilled with something that you didn't have before. And I'm trying to craft my own sort of initiatory rite that I can then pass on to my children whenever I have them. So I think if you're a magical practitioner, it's definitely worth thinking about how you can introduce future generations into the craft that you're following, or whatever craft that they want to follow. There's a really good book on this subject by Dr. Stephen Farmer called Sacred Ceremony. I would recommend it because it talks about the fundamental elements of any rite of passage. It talks about how to incorporate it into your daily life and how to craft an initiatory experience for yourself or for friends or for family. And it's a very, very helpful resource. It has helped me. I know that it's helped a couple of people that I know who've also read the book. And I don't know, it can set us on the path to transforming our society, one initiatory rite at a time. So I'm going to stop it there because I'm approaching 20 minutes. So I thank you all for listening. Until my next video, whenever that's going to be, wish you all much love, many blessings, a happy day or night wherever you are in the world. May God's go with you. Bye for now.